Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Samvaad session. The running theme is collaborative research, and today's talk is on collaboratively building assistive technology ecosystem for accessible education of children with visual impairment. Today's speakers are Manohar from Microsoft Research, Amit Prakash, our faculty colleague, and Supriya from Vision Empower. Let me quickly read out their bio. Manohar Swaminathan is a senior principal researcher at Microsoft Research India. He is also a the co-convener of Center for Accessibility in the Global South, CAGS. We see the logo there at IIIT-Bangalore. He was earlier a professor of computer science at IISc, from 1990 to 2005. Supriya is co-founder and managing trustee of Vision Empower Trust. VE was established in 2017 and now works in over 120 schools for blind across India on various initiatives related to accessible education for children with visual impairment. Prior to starting VE, Supriya was associated with multiple organizations in the Indian IT industry for over 2 decades. She's also the co-founder of Wemby Technologies as an assistive technology startup. Amit Prakash is a professor at IIIT-Bangalore. He is the convener of IIIT-B's Center for Accessibility in Global South. At IIIT-B, he is associated with the Center for IT and Public Policy and eHealth Research Center. He is co-founder of Vision Empower Trust and Wemby Technologies. So let me just pitch in from my perspective. I work in software engineering, which is not at all related with any of the things that are being discussed today. But I have the good fortune of having personally worked with all three speakers here at different times of my life. At some point, Manohar was my boss before I joined IIIT-Bangalore. I have worked on a couple of projects with Amit, and I worked on the RBD project, the Refreshable Braille Display project, which eventually led to the Wemby Technologies company with Supriya. So it's my good fortune to have been a colleague to all three distinguished speakers today, and let's welcome them warmly for today's speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujit. It's a pleasure to be back in Samvaad, and it's a pleasure to be back with Dr. Manohar and Supriya today. So what we'll be talking about is, and I think this is a wonderful theme to have, collaborative research. Most of what we do as research is collaborative. Calling it out is good. But I guess the essence of good research has to be collaboration at some level, because without collaboration, a lot of research that we do in most of the applied sciences and especially technology, we probably lose out on the beauty of what comes out of the research process. So what we'll do today is we'll talk about our journey over the last 6 years. So we have been collaborating on accessible education for visually impaired children. And we have been doing this over the last 6 years formally, almost 9 years informally, but formally about 6 years through projects and through different kinds of engagements. The way we will structure this is we'll try to take about 45 minutes for what we have planned as part of the talk. And we do hope that we will also have some interactions, because we have a lot of asks in terms of more collaborations. We need more and more collaborators to come along with us, because the kind of problems, the kind of challenges we are trying to address is immense and requires more people to come in and join. So I'll just lay the context. Our pass it on to Dr. Manohar for some guiding principles and approaches that we have been following over the last 6 years as we have been doing this project, program, whatever you may call it. Supriya will request her to talk about a lot of the initiatives on the ground. How has the overall research approach translated to something that is being practiced, something that is being implemented on the ground today? Uh, and I think it's not 120 schools, it's gone beyond 130 now, the last number that Supriya sent it. And then we'll take some time to reflect and pass on to some interactions. So the statistics from World Health Organization about people with vision impairments in the world is quite stark, approximately 2.2 billion persons. And this would mean anywhere between 15% to 20% of the population has some or the other sort of vision impairment. This includes blind and includes people who have different levels of, say, low vision, and there's a particular way in which vision impairment gets defined. So mild, severe, mild, moderate, and severe all constitute, and blindness all make up about 2.2 billion persons. India has the highest number, uh, and the numbers again are not very reliable or not very. So the official numbers of 2010-11 were 75 million, but we also have numbers from various other organizations which put it at close to 275 million, which would mean uh, if you're looking at 140 or 1.4 billion today, it's a significant number of our population, or significant proportion of our population today has vision impairment. Now, given that our school education system is largely not accessible for children who are visually impaired or who face vision impairment, and the inaccessibility is on multiple counts. It's not only with respect to content, it's also with respect to availability of uh, trained teachers. It is with respect to technology aids. It's also with respect to the physical infrastructure and the social mindsets. Children with visual impairment can do this thing, can do this, cannot do this. They should be taught this, they should not be taught this. All kinds of social mindsets exist. So inaccessibilities stem from all these different factors. Schools for the blind were most, so we have special schools for the blind, which takes in only blind and low vision students. And most of the children who are visually impaired go to these schools for their school education, at least up to primary level. So in these schools, and most of the schools that we have worked with and we know of, they have not been offering science and maths beyond primary level. So uh, typically around standard 5 is when they would say that now is the time you should move away from science and maths, because science and maths is not something that blind and people or children with vision impairments should be taking, even if they are interested. So that is what has been happening all this while. And this deprives the children not only of the joy of learning science and maths. So science and maths for many can actually be enjoyable. And the deprivation is not only on that count, but also increasingly, if you see today in our societies, the more rewarding careers are related to STEM. It's not only learning, but also career options that are no longer available to these children. So that's the background, or that's the motivation for why we want we should be looking at what we are doing now. Now, stepping back, what we have observed, uh, not only through the last 5-6 years, but also when we started to look at this particular context, we were largely influenced by some of these theoretical constructs and some of these concepts. One was around complexity and complexity of social systems. So complexity of social systems is characterized by all these different characteristics. So we have heterogeneity, so a number of stakeholders, a number of organizations, number of institutional arrangements, and they don't talk, or they don't have same goals that they're pursuing. So goal congruence amongst stakeholders leading to heterogeneity, emergence. So we are not very clear what, or a priori, it's very difficult to understand what is going to happen after a particular elapse of time. So emergence in terms of there, as we move on the path, there could be new aspects that could emerge. There is uncertainty. There's also strong self-organizing capabilities. So it's not always amenable, these complex social systems, they're not always amenable, or they're not always respond very well to something that is a centralized external control. Many a times they are what they are, and they are stable because they have this self-organizing capabilities. So that's one kind of pillar, and that's one understanding that we had when we started on this, and that got reinforced as we worked more and more, that we are in a context that is demonstrating complexity. The second one is wicked problems, this entire concept of wicked problems. Problems are wicked not because they are evil or they should not be solved. Problems are wicked because it's very difficult to understand what is the problem. So the problem formulation itself is a problem. And this class of problems are called wicked problems as opposed to tame and benign problems. Does not mean that tame and benign problems are easy to solve. They may be difficult to solve. What distinguishes wicked problems from tame and benign problems is the difficulty in formulating the problem. It's very difficult to understand what the problem is and whether we have arrived at a solution of that problem. So this entire solution finding, selecting, and problem finding, selecting, they're all intertwined, right? And because of this elusive clarity a priori about what the problem is, they need an approach to, it's not called solving, but resolution that is different from the typical class of tame and benign problems. And many a times, when we adopt approaches that are used for tame and benign problems to wicked problems, we end up with all kinds of issues. And then with that, and along with that, there's also this understanding that disability is not only a function of the body, so, but it is also a construct of the mind and the social physical environment. So there's over a period of last 50, 60 years, the way disability studies literature has progressed, it started with a very medical understanding of disability as some sort of an impairment of the body. But over a period of time, there's a growing realization that disability is not only because someone does not have a functioning eye or an ear, but it's also because of the psychological state of that person, as well as the social environment in which that person is placed. So this is the biopsychosocial model of disability. Now, with all these three broad kind of heretical constructs, what we understood was that given the continued neglect and marginalization of persons with disabilities, an appreciation of accessibility as a wicked problem is important. Accessibility, for the most part, we saw has been looked at either from a very simplistic construction of a medical model and trying to be solved through providing certain solutions that are there to solve for that medical or the bodily function. And accessibility accessibility as a wicked problem set in a complex social context is something that we felt will help us in terms of addressing the capacity and awareness concerns, given the neglect and marginalization of persons with disabilities in our societies, especially the societies of the Global South. And given all that, so given that construct or given that as a landscape that we were trying to work in, collaborative design practices that allow for uncovering and coming together of diverse and multiple perspectives have been found to be very useful. So in the literature, when problems are of this type, when the contexts are complex, when you have so many different aspects to be looking at, uh, the, the most acceptable way to proceed is collaboration. Design has to be set in a collaborative context so that this multiplicity of worldviews, multiplicity of perspectives could be uncovered. And along with that uncovering, all this coming together of diverse perspectives in interdisciplinary teams could help us navigate through the complexity and handle the wickedness. We are not trying to simplify complexity here. Complexity is a reality. We are not trying to say that wicked problems, or we are not trying to wish away wicked problems. Wicked problems are there to exist. We are just trying to navigate through these wicked problems. So what we are trying to highlight here is that we have approached this from the perspective of a wicked problem, accessibility as a wicked problem set in a complex social context. And that has allowed us to accept collaborative design practices as a useful way to move forward in our journey. So with that, I'll invite Dr. Manohar to talk about our guiding principles and what we are doing now.
Cameras here. Right on. Yeah, very happy to be here. I always like to be at IIIT-Bangalore for many reasons, especially the bringing together of technology, societal impact, humanity, social sciences on an equal footing, which rarely happens outside IIIT-Bangalore. That's why it has a special place in my heart. So the guiding principles, again, I'm not going to go into the details because interdisciplinary, intersectional, participatory, collaborative action research, there are many people at IIIT who know better about all of this. But this is just to articulate some of the things that personally, as a tech person moving into something more of societal impact, I've discovered along the way. What I would go is to just step back into these three abstract intersections that think about disability, technology, and societal impact. Normally, the intersection of disability and technology is what is broadly called as assistive technology. People try to bring solutions for people with disabilities, and AT, assistive technology, is a purely technology play. There are intersections between how technology can be used for large-scale societal impact. So in areas like ICTD and technology for empowerment, these two are looked at together. And broadly, the disability rights, the policies, government interventions are all aimed at bringing quality of life improvement to people with disabilities by all of these interventions. So what we thought about, we actually presented this to set up the Center for Accessibility about 4 years ago to Professor Sadagopan, is that the Center for Accessibility will bring in a unique perspective of disability, in particular with respect to the Global South, technology and societal impact, as a long-term hub for collaboration among various stakeholders. And fortunately for us, and given the IIIT's DNA, this was accepted, and this is our 4th year of CAGS, maybe stepping into the 4th year. And this kind of reflects the DNA of the work that we have been doing in this particular area of addressing needs of people with vision impairments. What I will do is mention some of these. Again, I'm not going to go into details, but all of these are the intersections that continuously are at play when we are talking about our project. Lived experience of people with disabilities is most important. And in particular, education, pedagogy for children with vision impairments, and as Amit mentioned, with a focus on computational thinking and STEM. The broader socioeconomic context of all of these children, where they are, where they live, where they come from. And of course, the huge area of work in computer systems, technologies that are on their own track, independent of the end users. and really a lot of field work and actual interactions, training, and so on. Government initiatives, policy support, all of them are in this big mix. But what I thought I'll spend a little bit more time is my personal evolution in this journey. 8 years ago, 7 years ago, I joined Microsoft Research with this big picture abstraction of VR, AR. How can I make impact with that in a country like India? Very quickly, I mean, I was talking about things like HoloLens, which was the talk of the town in 2016. And the disruption that happened to my career was Preeti, who's not here, but I've not had the opportunity to publicly thank her for shifting my previous 7 years away from wherever I would have gone. She introduced me to Vidya as a student here and said, can you guide the summer project for the student? At that time, I was looking at AR, VR and saying virtual reality is about all the senses, immersing all the senses, right? And making it feel like it's real. And my perception was sitting in India, looking at all the visual aspects, the gaming, the immersive 3D movies, all of that visual things. There are many people around the world doing it. So what can I do which will be a little easier and not much competition? I was looking at audio, spatial audio. Spatial audio is something where you can locate a source of sound in 3 dimensions and make it appear as if it is coming from wherever you want it to be. So I thought from a very technology perspective that for a person with vision impairment, audio is the primary input source for the world. And if I can provide a very accurate representation of the world in audio and train this person in using this sense of audio to navigate the world, maybe things can get better. So I had this pompous name called AWARE, Audio Augmented Virtual and Real Environment, which says train the person in a virtual environment of spatial audio and give the same audio inputs in the real world. Bingo, this person knows how to act in the world. So she's going to do well. In any case, when Vidya came into the picture, I did a summer project and asked her to look at games and play in computers that a person with vision impairment can play with. And she confessed that after when she was 7, 8, she has never been asked to play because everybody said study, study, study. And she was delighted the summer project was about play and computer games. So she was intensely focused on identifying every game that was possible on Android, iPad, laptop, trying to figure out what was accessible, what was not, and giving me a report. Then she became an intern in 2017. And in this period, play was very interesting to me. And so we at MSR, along with Joyjit Pal, who some of you know, we created this new methodology called ludic design for accessibility, which essentially, maybe I'll spend a minute on it, and then I'll come back to this slide. So ludic design is the methodology that basically puts play at the center of everything, because play is what makes us human. We are human because we play, and we play because we are human. It's fundamental to us. And any solution for accessibility should be a play that, by intensely engaging with the players, gain skills as a side effect. Play is central. What you gain is a side effect. So that is the ludic design for accessibility. It is subtly different from play-based learning, play-based XYZ. Play is central. The benefit is a side effect. So this was the methodology we created in 2017, which would have purely remained a nice, interesting paper in some place, except that Vision Empower happened in 2017, and they breathed life into this whole methodology. And this was, again, interesting because after finishing MS Digital Society, she was not able to get a job. People said, oh, you're blind, what are you going to do? And Amit, fortunately, said, hey, why are you asking for employment? Give employment to people. Why don't you use IIIT's entrepreneurship initiative to start a nonprofit Vision Empower? 2017 it was. And Vidya came back as a research fellow, and we started working on Project WICT. Idea again was computational thinking for children with vision impairments. How do you get them very early on? Again, all of this would have been top-level tech perspective. I said computational thinking, but eventually when Vision Empower went to specific schools, talked to teachers, used Vidya's personal experience as a person with blindness, it became very clear that there's so many complex problems out there that sitting in some lab trying to do some fancy methodology, nothing is going to be cut. And so This collaboration is not about some technology being created and then you do some study saying, can it be used for this population, refine it, go back? No, the problem definition has to come from the end users. And you have to create an environment where the people with potential to solve a problem, people who have the problem, the environment which is going to assist in the scaled implementation of the problem, all of them get together at the very start. And it has to be continuously iterated on. And this has been going on for now 6 years. And the last step, the immediate last year is Seeds, which is a project that I will spend a minute talking about. Then I'll hand it over to Supriya. Most of the work we did for the first 4 or 5 years was trying to improve numeracy in children with vision impairment. So we started with computational thinking, but identified quickly that numeracy was such a weak link that we cannot talk about computing when numeracy was at stake. So the next 3 or 4 years was completely numeracy based. And there's nothing tech about it. It's all tangible toys, artifacts that children can play, get in their homes, but pick up numeracy as a side effect. So it was fortunate from my side, MSR side, Microsoft was able to support me while there's no tech in it. That's very important. What is needed to be solved has to be solved, not you carry a tech and then say, okay, I have this hammer, where are the nails? Which is usually where tech goes, because you don't understand what is really needed. And you feel good if you can strike a few nails here and there. Great, I've done my job. Manufacture another hammer, go after other nails. This one is, we realized that children need numeracy and there are so many constraints. I mean, we can spend a whole course talking about all the constraints I personally discovered because we're actually having teachers with vision impairments talk to us, go to schools with vision impairments, and so on and so forth. So 4 years of zero tech. But eventually our goal is computational thinking, computing is the vehicle for everyone to get up to speed. But we wanted to build the network, get an understanding, and then go one step. And the last thing I'll talk about is this project called Seeds, which is scalable educational experiences with digital scaffolding, which has got cut there, doesn't matter. The idea is use feature phones by children. Feature phones are these old things which you think is out of fashion. I tell you, it's going to come back in huge fashion back because voice is king now. With all the language machines and natural language interface is going to come back. And a phone with tangible keys are easy for anyone to pick up. Children with vision impairments as well as older people. Anybody in your home, older people will be afraid of smartphones. I won't touch it because it will do random things. But buttons, everybody knows 1 to 9, 0. And IVR is an experience that has been tried with communities across the world for many years. So bringing the interactive voice response system, everybody knows the bank thing, OTP thing, press 1 for this, 2 for this, that is IVR, right? That's very easy to use by anybody. And we found out in our experiments very early on, the kids picked up in 5 minutes. Phone, okay, this is on, this is off, this is lock, unlock. They teach their friend, and they're all set on this core tech. But with this tech, a teacher holding an Android phone can direct interesting digital content to a group of children who may not be physically present. This was starkly made visible when pandemic, all the children are sent home and they were completely unconnected from schools. Unlike other children who had some parents or somebody who will connect to the teacher and so on, they were completely out of touch. But with this, we are hoping, we have had a good summer project where 30 children were sent home with their feature phones, and teachers would run sessions for about 12 weeks, where 2-hour sessions or 1-hour session kind of a max, and they will have interaction like our Zoom calls. Now, this technology is very promising, and we had an excellent project. So now there's technology, and the next step here is we want to bring in generative AI to teachers to create interesting, relevant, understandable content to the children, and then deliver it through this network. And this network is what Supriya will talk about next as to, these are all technology pieces. Without the end users continuously being involved, you cannot scale. So our mission is not just to do a paper or one technology. Every child who is vision impaired should be able to benefit by this. And that's immensely wicked. And that's a nice term, and I'll let Supriya deal with this. Thank you.
Very good afternoon to all of you. So you have to deal with my cracked voice today. So sorry about that. It's actually a pleasure. Last two Samvads was online. So it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. So as the context has been set by Professor Amit Prakash and Dr. Swami Manohar, um, I'll be just talking about how Vision Empower has benefited from all this that has just been presented to you. So I'll just talk about Vision Empower. We started in 2017 here, incubated at IIIT. Many of you know about it, and some of you who are new, for your knowledge. So it was started by Vidya, and Professor Amit Prakash and myself joined her in creating an organization which we chose to be not for profit, because what we felt that we really didn't know what product we were going to create in our organization. We just knew that there was a problem out there and that the problem was complex and we wanted to do something about it. And so in the institute, we knocked many doors to try and learn how we should go about it. And Professor Rajgopalan was here. He actually advised us on what would be the pros and cons of the different kinds of organizations if we set it up. And eventually, Vidya and I found that the not-for-profit was the way to go. So we started this, and what we really do is, we work with children in the special schools, and our objective, our vision is to create inclusive and equitable school education system. And of course, our focus area was always on STEM, that is science and maths, because that was the area where the children with visual impairment eventually are underrepresented. Not children, people with visual impairment are underrepresented. And so we felt that if we had to address that problem, then we had to begin when they were very young. And therefore, while there were many ways to work on this problem, there was advocacy to work on. There was, every school that we went to speak to wanted us to work on high school curriculum, because they wanted their children to do well as in get good marks and things like that. So they wanted us to work with high school, but we felt that if we really have to bring in some sort of a shift, some sort of an interest in the subject, or at least some aspirations to grow in the children, then we should, as they say, catch them young and find what they want to do exactly. Right. So that's why we started with school, especially with primary school. And yeah, the main thing was that whatever it is that they wanted to study, we should be able to help them to study that. Of course, STEM, but we didn't go with the mindset that, yeah, we'll go to school and just teach science and maths, but find out what are the ways in which, whether it was technology, with the help of technology, that is leveraging technology, or with the help of maybe existing or modified processes, pedagogic processes, because none of us were either special educators or even remotely, school teachers. So we had to find out the real problems and then work on that. So over these 3 years, what we've really created is, an organization which has grown, the portfolio has grown, so on and so forth. I'll tell you about these things. But what we found is, we also introspected as we went along, and also from all the inputs that we got from everywhere. What is it that we really have to do if we're going to address this sort of a wicked problem, or what you call it, the systems thinking, you have to apply that. So we felt that our programs, our entire interventions, or the object, if you are to meet the objectives, then we need to think in 3 directions. One was to basically at the schools to deepen the knowledge, to understand how the pedagogic process should be applied to the child and the teacher. The child as well as the teacher is very important, especially in the special schools in India. 80% of the teachers are themselves visually impaired. And they have not studied science and maths. And they are teaching science and maths. So that's why it's sort of wicked, right? And so you need to be able to support them. And these are very well-meaning teachers, and you really need to go with a very systematic way of how you're going to train the trainer. So the pedagogic approach that we had to follow for this was also participatory. We learned from them what they do in class. We sat in class, learned from them, and then created the processes, whatever we use today. Okay, so it was very important. So the two pillars are teachers and students, and that is where we basically work and create accessible pedagogies. And for science and maths, especially, we had to even start with, creating the book itself. There was no science book. There was no maths book. There is something called Nemeth code, using which math is represented in Braille. But the teachers themselves were not trained on Nemeth. So they were not able to teach the children how to write in Nemeth. So we had to understand it ourselves and come up with some methods, etc. So this is one large part of it. The second we felt is that, okay, you work at the schools, but you can't just work in one school and say, it will take you eons to solve this problem, which is so widespread, right? So therefore, you really need to put in some sort of a systems thinking in approach, so that you will be able to take this solution to other children, other schools, maybe clusters of schools. And then, of course, we know how diverse our country is. Every state speaks a different language, has a different script, and you have to be able to give this content in their language, etc. So you need some sort of understanding as to how will you create a system which will cater to these diverse needs. That was something that was there at the back of our head. And for this also, we needed to actually travel crisscross the country and understand how that could be done, if at all, right? And then the other most important thing was that, you can do this in maybe a clusters of schools, and then you can do it in some states. But if you're really going to bring about this paradigm shift, where you're talking of bringing in technology, you're talking of innovating on technology, capacity building of teachers so that they can contribute to the larger education system, so that, overall, over a period of the next 2 decades, maybe this new policy can be adopted. So luckily for us at that time, the NEP was also getting formulated, and then we found a lot of congruence by the time NEP was, published. And we worked, here is where the whole collaborative thing came in. So we were a Wipro seeding fellow, actually, when we started. We got a fellowship from Wipro Foundation, and we started our work through that. So we were very closely associated with a lot of conversation which was going on at that time. Microsoft Research. All right. Thank you. So we basically, with Microsoft Research, thanks to the computational thinking project, and thanks to the collaboration with IIIT, we were able to get a much broader understanding, both theoretically as well as in terms of how we could take our programs more systematically to others. And we also, one very important thing that we learned at that time was also the fact that, just having pillars of support from organizations, institutions, which are institutions in their own right. As an organization, we were 3 people who started the organization. Today, we are 70 plus. But the thing is that confidence that you can create so many programs, or you can create so many, you can actually realize some of these ideas, and you can actually implement them. You can actually throw out your problem to the beneficiaries, and then learn from them and create something together. This whole collaborative approach, it's not so I would say it's easy is not the word. It's not so simple, in the sense that, yeah, collaboration sounds very simple. It's not so simple. The whole thing about letting your guard down, working with the community, letting them contribute to the problem and the solution, is something we were open to. And that is what we learned actually here at IIIT, thanks to the training that we got here. And so with that was the third axis of our interventions. I'll quickly go to how the collaborative approach works in our operational model. So if you see what I just mentioned are two pillars, the teachers and students, and we work with them at schools. Here for the teachers, we create certain set of resources. For the children, we create other set of resources. These are both artifacts, tactile artifacts or models or diagrams, or it could be the book itself, right? So all kinds of things. Similarly, for the teachers, we create teacher instruction kits so that they can actually use those in the classroom, right? We create tutorials for them. We created a whole lot of tutorials actually in collaboration with, I don't know how many, more than a dozen organizations now. Hope Foundation, we actually collaborated with them to create a huge bunch of tutorials on digital literacy for teachers with visual impairment. So in Tamil Nadu, there are 1,200 teachers who are teaching in the government schools. They are visually impaired. They teach in the government mainstream government schools, and they are visually impaired, and they were not digitally literate. And they, during the pandemic, you can imagine the kind of problems they had because they had to teach. So we created a program with them to be able to, the more than 120 odd, tutorials were created. So similarly, there were many others with XRCVC from Mumbai, with Saksham in Delhi, lots of others. So we created all these are all resources, and we have we have a LMS on which we upload all our tutorials. That LMS again was created here at IIIT with with support and help from students and the faculty members, with whom basically through a brainstorming process as well as a technology evaluation process. And eventually now we have an LMS which is by design accessible. I don't know if there are any other in the world like that, actually. Very happy to say that by design it is accessible from the word zero. So that is the beauty of this system. We created the LMS, and that was not the only, we created the LMS basically because we felt that whatever we create at Vision Empower, we are creating in collaboration with so many people. And it is something which is every child or every teacher's right to get access to. It's not something for us to create and just keep. It's for everybody. And that's why we have to create it in such a way so that it can be made available to everybody. That's why the Subodha LMS was designed in that way, that it's on open edX, open source, so that it can be made available. And also it had to have means in which the community could collaborate. So the features had to be designed in that way. Okay, but there was a paradox in that. Now the teachers for whom we created it, or the children for whom we created it, were not digitally literate. So we had a system a little ahead of its time, right? But what we feel today is that, yeah, we've created a system. It has to be adopted. The teachers have to use it. Students have to use it. But for that, if we didn't have a system, we wouldn't know what to take to them. So we're very happy that we started this about 5 years back. And, today we have something which we have two versions. One is on the web app, and one is on the Android, the Play Store. You can download it and use it. So these are the two this is the technology initiative which was started first, but we felt that there was scope for many more. So right from the beginning, we've collaborated here, Professor Sujit, Professor Shrikant, everybody has been very supportive, and many projects were initiated. Whenever there was an idea, we felt it was, it was the institution just opened its doors for us to go and discuss. Professor Madhav Rao, we discussed and we came up with many projects out of so many ideas came. There were interns who came, who worked here with us. There were students from the institute who interned with us, so on and so forth. One project which also eventually has led, as Professor Sujit said, to the creation of another company called Wemby Technologies, is the refreshable braille display. So I'll just go to that quickly. And what I want to though bring to your notice is that while all of this was being done, if you see the topmost layer, that is where we really want to be. That is, whatever we create should be made available to the community, to the teachers, to researchers through shared resource centers. We would like to ensure that they communicate with each other through whatever platforms we have created or others create. They should be able to communicate with each other, learn from each other. Those are the communities of practice we want to create. We want to be able to take our state level improvisations, which we have made, to a nationwide level. And what's very important for us, we've created all these pedagogic improvements or improvisations, I would say, that we have done at schools. But what is very important is that this gets embedded in the pre-service or in-service teacher education itself, so that it becomes a part of the mainstream. So these are just some examples of the resources which provide. You see there are many of these are actually from other collaborators, our partner organizations, the tactile diagrams from Raise Lines Foundation, the geometry kits. This is one geometry kit which is from Worth Trust, but we actually created a geometry kit in collaboration with Touche Tech Technologies, and that's a very innovative one. About 150 of those have been distributed this year across the country. It's a beautiful new geometry kit which teachers and children love. And of course, there are many other games. The cards you see here are the ones which actually made Vision Empower what it is through the program called VICT. It's computational thinking for children with visual impairment. These are the cards made as per the ludic approach, and the children just love playing all the. I think currently we have about more than 60 odd games, which we play at the schools. We have a calendar which we follow, and the children across the country just wait for that period during the whole week to, enjoy themselves. Through our pedagogic approaches, we've brought about changes, as you can see here, and a lot of this was influenced highly by the LDA, the ludic approach, that the teacher is at best, as Dr. Manohar says, is at best an experienced player, and how they learn from each other. So all of this has been introduced. We have very regular, we call them Anubhav sessions, the experiential learning sessions with children throughout the country. And we have teacher trainings which are called Pragya. So we organize these, and we also have weekly school visits to all our schools where we conduct programs. So these are just a few pictures of very recent events. As you can see, the one where you see all the ladies in uniform, this is our attempt now to enter the B.Ed programs. So we are now introducing the program through B.Ed. This is in Pudukkottai. We have been offering programs. In NIPVD Chennai, we are offering programs, semester-long 16-week programs for teachers. Similarly, the one picture in the middle you see is in IIC Jatni. The government of Odisha has given us space where we've created an experiential zone, which is an inclusive center, where the government actually brings the teachers and students, and we conduct the trainings, so on and so forth. This one is in West Bengal, one is in Pune, and one is in Bangalore, I think. This is our app. I will wrap up. So this is our app as well as the web version. As you can see, this is Subodha, and it's the LMS in all local languages in India. Sorry. So as you can see that, you can, the teachers can browse in their own languages and they would get access to the content on the fly in their language. This is the device, Hexis, which was created here with support from Minro, and Professor Sujit was the principal investigator on that project with us. We created this beautiful device. As you can see, I put in that picture for those of you who are new. This is Aishwarya's favorite book, Harry Potter. And the size of the book in print is, you can see, and compare it with the size of the book on Braille print. It has 12 volumes of A3 size almost. So you can imagine how difficult it would be for a child to read. And that was the problem we set out to solve. How do you provide reading material to the child on the fly when they want to read? And so that was the beauty. A very good friend of mine, Raj Gopal, agreed to join, and he's a brilliant engineer. And him, Professor Sujit, some students from here collaboratively put together, and Dr. Manohar has introduced us to many people worldwide who have helped us. We've created this product now, which is now in the market. We've rolled out about 460 to 470 odd devices across the country. We are running currently a pilot in 5 schools specifically. We actually ran a research pilot throughout the whole of last year. There was a lot of learning. Now, here is the participatory thing which happened over the last year with Hexis. One is, of course, when creating it, the initial learning from technologists, learning from social scientists, learning from research labs, bringing it all together and so on and so forth. But what was beautiful was the last 1.5 year, we had a researcher on board. His name was Shiladitya. He was with us. And for the whole Vision Impact team, he was just an employee. They okay, what does Shiladitya do? He goes and he trains teachers, he trains students on how to use Hexis. But what he was really doing was whenever he was going, he was gathering so many observations and coming back to us with rich data about what the teachers hated, what the children loved, and how the content was to be made effective, and what kind of features were not required, what is the feature which was to be added, so on and so forth. And all the children and the teachers in all the 105 schools of last year that we were part of gave us inputs on this. With that, what you see, so the white device is what went to the schools, and today what you have is this black device, and it has many features, beautiful, an interface for the teachers. We call it Antara, using which the teacher just has to cut and paste or type or do anything, put content in any Indian language, and that will come in Braille of that language on the device immediately. This device actually won the AI for A Accessibility Award from Microsoft, and is still, we are very lucky that the additional device to it, which is, I've not written about it, it's called Iris. It's a diagram comprehension device which goes along with this, has also won the award this year. So with all this is our stakeholder ecosystem. I don't want to take too much time, but this is a very important slide because I really want to acknowledge everybody who has helped us to where we are today. IIIT, Microsoft, and all our funders, the technology partners, as you can see, Raise Lines Foundation, Touche Tech, Enability, and of course, all the CSR other foundations who worked with us. And of course, a very important role in this is that of the government. In many states, we work very closely with the government, and with their approval and as per their requirements, we have to create our programs. So with this, I will just say this is just a slide to show the growth over the last 6 years. I think currently we are somewhere around close to 3,000 students we have touched this year, and yeah, about I think 133 schools across about 13 states. Amit, would you like to take? Thank you so much.
what we have found in terms of some of these initiatives on the ground, in terms of technology initiatives, in terms of socio-technical initiatives, in terms of social initiatives, the changes that have been brought about, I think we have been served well in terms of our initial understanding of the context as complex, of the problem as wicked, which has allowed us to be incremental and iterative in our approaches, something that the agile mindset also tries to talk about. So in that sense, we have been agile, we have been responsive. Uh, uh, I guess we do acknowledge that uh, the coming together of more and more people, more and more organizations, interdisciplinary perspectives is important for us to sense what is required, for us to sense what is working well, what is not working well. And that is something that we feel has been very important in the way this entire program is currently unfolding. So that is what we thought we should highlight in terms of how uh, uh, this intermeshed, intertwined, or enmeshed, intertwined approach of research, practice, participatory action research for social impact uh, can also be thought of. It need not always be a big bang centralized technology trust, but something like this is also what we feel could sustain us for a longer time. Uh, Given the magnitude of what we are trying to work in, what has been done is not much. I would also not say that we have not been able to do anything. There has been substantial progress made, but the journey and the road is a long is too long. It's like there's a lot more that needs to be done. We're still in about 130 odd schools. There are more than 500 schools for the blind in the country. There are many taluks and districts in the country where we don't have schools for the blind, and that's where children go to what are considered inclusive schools, or what are so we have to see how can they actually be translated into accessible and inclusive spaces. So that is something that needs to happen. Basically, what I think with a right to education, with RPWD Act, it is a right for all our children, whether they are visually impaired or otherwise, to get good quality education, and that is what we are trying to work towards. And eventually, we also hope that it will lead to more persons with vision impairments in STEM careers. We probably will see more and more students at IIIT who are with visual impairment. We will have them not only in the digital society programs, but also in our computer science and EC programs. And that is when we'll see more and more persons with vision impairment in the IT industry. So they working on technology products, and the industry then also realizing, and not only, and with the industry employing more persons with vision impairments in mainstream roles, we probably would be looking towards mindset changes. So we would then not say that people who are visually impaired cannot take up science, maths, cannot produce technologies, cannot lead companies that produce technologies. So that is what we want to do. There's something on Gen AI also that we are trying to work on. So there are different extensions to the technology layer. There are different extensions to the teacher training and content layer. So at all those different layers, and some of these layers are definitely intertwined, so they interact with each other very closely. There are so many different directions that we want to take, and while we take that, we are also aware that we may end up forking out, we may end up taking a U-turn. All those things are possibilities that that we are we will not feel very uncomfortable with. We'll be a bit frustrated once in a while, but with the theoretical conceptual approach of the framing of the issue in terms of complexity and in terms of wickedness, I think that's where we derive the comfort that what we do is open to scrutiny and is open to change. So thank you very much. We'll be happy to take questions. And we're also looking for more and more collaborators from within the institute, faculty colleagues, students, researchers, to come forward and work along with us in our, and then come along with us in our journey, because there's so many issues. They're not only related to technologies, they're also related to institutional regulatory aspects, also related to content. So in terms of science, math content, how can pedagogical approaches be changed? And how can we actually move towards, let's say, teaching of physics in a way that for which we don't have to create separate accessible content? How can the entire content and pedagogical styles be inclusive for all our children in the society, whether they are vision impaired, whether they are hearing impaired, whether they have intellectual disabilities? Can we create pedagogical approaches which are inclusive for all? So thank you very much. All of us are here to take your questions.
Thanks, Amit, Dr. Swami, Manohar, and Supriya for an excellent presentation and the outcome, tangible outcomes that you have reached. So there is one thing Supriya said about technology. Technologies create, certain, artifacts. However, the stakeholders of the system, such as teachers and students, may not be that much digitally or technology literate to absorb that particular technology. So there is a gap, right? Now, we have found that in most of the cases, if the gap is too large, then the technology fails because the early adopters will not be able to adopt it. So is that gap too large, or is it possible that the stakeholders have overcome this particular gap and then be an early adopter of this technology for it to be useful for them and the society at large? So what are the mechanisms by which this gap can be bridged? Because this gap is bound to exist in any technology development.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer this question, but just take a shot at it. I'll just tell you from our experience of Subodha. If you really look at how Subodha was built, right? It, like, when we started designing it, we felt that we needed something which would make it accessible and so on and so forth. But the fact that the teachers would, like, we would have to actually get them to go through our digital literacy training. And we, at that time when we started making Subodha, we didn't have any digital literacy tutorial. We didn't even have digital literacy training for teachers. So we were learning from Vidya what a screen reader is. And that was where we were. So what we do feel, I do agree with you that if there is too large a gap, then it will be a failure. That's true. That's why it was very important. And I think there have been points in time during the evolution of Subodha till where it is now, where there have been concerns about, for what are you doing it? Is it only a repository of information for you to access inside Vision Empire, or is it for teachers, or is it for students? For example, we have student material on Subodha. Now, the students have actually to be trained first to be able to use it. The schools don't have computers. If they do have, it might be non-working, or they don't have a period where they will be allowed to use Subodha. If at all they have a period, it will just be to teach them Excel or something. They'll not be allowed to go to Subodha and explore. So there are lots of factors which we certainly have to keep in mind. But what we did feel, though, through in this whole thing, that's why I said that communities of practice is so important, because It's a space which you create with the help of your beneficiaries, where they're talking to each other. And the minute one child or one teacher says, "Oh, I found this and I did this, and this is available," then someone else gets interested. So it's that effect is very important. The network effect is very important, we feel, in this process. For example, so when I went to Uttarakhand to do the training, now in Uttarakhand, they don't have special schools. They have just two, which are, resource centers. Otherwise, all children go to regular government schools. There would be about more than 300 children in the government schools who are visually impaired. Maybe one child or two children per school, something like that they have. Now, what they have is a system of resource teachers who go to the school and they're supposed to help the teachers. So when these resource teachers are special educators and we were training them. So when we showed them Subodha, they were like, "What are you doing sitting on this?" I mean, why don't you just take it and make noise about it and tell people and show them? They will be takers. So what we felt right from the beginning was that we wanted to bring it to a certain stage and then take it. And so, but they were like, "You don't wait for that. You please go now." So in fact, just yesterday, there was a newspaper item in Uttarakhand, some newspaper, where I had visited the resource center with Mr. Ganesh. It was his resource center. They put up that picture on that and said that, that there are so many organizations who are now willing to come and tell people who are visually impaired about their rights, and they're creating technologies to help them. So what I'm getting at it is that maybe much more communication, much more awareness has to be developed, and then maybe, the gap will not be that much. This is what I'm thinking.
To the project being implemented. Stepping back, I think the technology used depends on the benefit to the user. So example is, who would have thought vegetable vendor on the street would be using QR codes to collect money? Because there is money collection, they figure out what to do, how to do, install it, right? And during the pandemic, teachers with vision impairments who had smartphones would record things and then send it to the parent of the child, who will then play it, ask them to record it and send it back. So they would take the effort when there is a benefit. And that caused us to then, Vidya created tutorials about Gmeet, Google Meet was foreign to most of the teachers. So starting from installation of an app, which was new, install Google app first, come on a Google Meet, then we will talk. Pandemic made them need this. Otherwise, why would I do Google Meet? I'll go meet people in school, right? There is a need, and then you go with a solution and handhold them to come there. It's not as if they cannot learn it. You need to figure out how to tell them to do it, because Vidya is a domain expert. She could explain it in a way. So every teacher got on to Google Meet. So technology, the gap is, if you go as a technology and say, here is the beautiful technology, use it, then you find the gap. You find what is the need, and as a technology, you are smart enough, you better find out a solution which starts with the minimal gap, and you put in the effort to close the gap. I think that's the approach that Subodha has been taken. I think in every piece of work that we are doing, we are learning about this process of the gap. Is a myth created by tech creators first. If you go from the solution point of view, the gap is in our understanding of the problem rather than the technology.
I have a related question, but slightly at a different level. So, is it one observation? I'd just like to start with an observation. So most of what we learn in terms of abstract science, physics, or math, or whatever, has its roots in some kind of lived experience. So Euclidean geometry, for example, has its roots in geometry, right? The measurement of Earth. And similarly, astronomy, a lot of maths today has its roots in astronomy and so on, right? And somehow, while it is very important for taking what we consider mainstream abstractions, right, to the visually impaired, somehow I feel we may be missing out on the primacy of their lived experience. For example, if we were to ask, or if there were a world where everybody were to be visually impaired, And if they were to develop a math, it would probably look pretty different, from what we. In the sense that there has to be some kind of primacy given to the approach in which they develop their science, the approach. So we had kind of worked on a similar issue. Just to give an example, we were looking at community worldviews. Of a lot of communities in India pretty much contain oral knowledge. Knowledge is oral, very low digital literacy and so on. So we had a huge recordings of community discourses from a village near Tumkur. We built an audio search engine on top of that, and we were able to identify named entities and do some analytics. And one of the things we found is we searched for typical terms like, say, development, health, and so on, right? And contrasted what are the nearby terms in the community corpus versus a news corpus, in mainstream news corpus. And we found very significant differences. For example, when we talk about economy or development, the news corpus talks about investment and Bangalore, whatever, industry and so on. While the community corpus talks about the Gaudru, the village head and Sala, the loan. And so what is meaningful to them when it comes to economy is very different from what we consider is economy. And somehow some primacy needs to be given to the conceptualizations that come from that lived experience. So that's so I just thought, how would we kind of approach this?
Not exactly in science, but we spent some time looking at what it means for a blind person to engage with art. So Aishwarya, maybe you should talk about it rather than me. I'll give you the mic.
Hi, audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so like Manohar sir just said, we spent a little bit of time, actually a lot of time, still spending a lot of time looking at how we can create art when we sort of liberate art, so to speak, from its visual primacy and bring it to the tactile domain. By art here, I don't mean, things like sculpting or things that are traditionally already 3D, but a sort of a 2.5D representation of the world. So if we look at something like that, how would you represent in absence of light, shadow, shading, things like that? And we're thinking about this for congenitally blind children and generally congenitally blind people who have never seen pictures in their lives. What are their impressions of pictures like? What is it that creates, like, when you look at something and you like a piece of art, what is it that you like about it? Or what does a blind person like about a particular piece of art? And if we don't tell children that this is what art is supposed to be like, this is what a picture is supposed to look like, and these are the rules, so to speak, for creating pictures. And if we don't tell children any of this, and if we don't bring any of our visual conceptualizations of art into art making for children who are blind, what kind of grammar, what kind of semiotics of art will actually emerge is primarily what we're looking at.
Because it is kind of interesting to see a blind person paint, they get visibility. But what does it really mean? Enjoying a painting, a sighted person enjoys a painting. How do you enjoy it? Why do you enjoy it? Is there an equivalent semiotics and understanding and joy for a child who is blind to first appreciate what it is art. Only then you can create art. And it should not be tied to the vision. So exactly the point. That's where it is very deep. I mean, most people have, and you're bringing even more complex thing about science and that. But art is beautiful. And the other thing which is left out of education for the children is art. One standard, what shall I say, uh, stereotyping is, oh, you're blind, either you learn music or you do some handwork or something, right? That is kind of, boxing them. But art is beautiful, it gives you expression, self-expression, which is also limited, right? Or you try, and the thing Aishwarya's experience is diverse. She has been trying paintings and she spent enormous time trying to use what are called, I mean, they will label the box saying this is brown, this is black, this is green. And she's supposed to use green for grass and brown for mountain. And she spent half the time finding out which box is brown and which plot is this. Eventually said, what the hell, why am I doing all this? Because what is it meaningless to me? So more important thing is texture, right? Texture I can do. So texture, a tree for a blind person is rough and is not brown, it is rough. And so if I want to recreate my abstract tree on a piece of paper, I would put rough textures here, sand texture here, sky, I don't know what a blind person will think of as a sky, right? So that openness to exploration is something which is not being done. And when you explore it and introduce it part of the school curriculum, children will have another avenue for creativity. I mean, of course, another question that mainstream schools are cut down all creativity of all kinds. And so that's a different problem. I'll stop talking about it, but
No, I think the lived experience of persons with disability is something that we are very cognizant of, and that's where how can we teach physics? How can we teach biology? Why should digestive system always be drawn in a particular way? All those things will have to be rethought of, and therefore the need to bring in a lot of people from the education, pedagogy, the basic domain of those disciplines to engage in these kinds of conversations, that now the teaching of those concepts has to also consider children who are not who are blind, children who cannot hear, all those things. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this session. It's really heartwarming and very motivating to see all the wonderful work that you've all done. So my question is related more to the curriculum side. I see that there are numerous ways to overcome how things are done in the classroom, right? Or the pedagogy. So what are some of the challenges in math and science that you have seen in curricula? I think you're working more on the primary education side, right? And how do you think, tacking on to what Manohar sir just said about how you play on strengths, right? The textiles or textures being a strength in art education. How do you play on strengths to make the curriculum more inclusive?
Yeah, exactly. So we were actually introduced to some of these concepts through pedagogic experts. That's how we learned, is that learning is multisensory. And so we explore other senses of learning. So a lot of it is, both audio as well as tactile. So we have diagrams which are tactile, like she said, 2.5D diagrams, of course, 3D models, and textures. We use multiple kinds of textures. There are people like at IIT Delhi, there's been a huge amount of research which started even before we joined this, domain, where they've actually come up with a way of creating molds for, textbook pictures or 2D pictures, which are then converted to 3D embossed pictures. So there are those, and then there are technologies like Enability Foundation has created a machine called Tactograph. So we create very low cost diagrams using those, that uses Fevicol actually. So you can put Fevicol into the gun and then something like a plotter, and then it plots, it dries up. So you have very low cost tactile diagrams, which we distribute in the schools with the help of Paul D'Souza, who is our maverick inventor. He has actually, so Aishwarya had complained, you know what, I want to draw, I like to draw, but every drawing I make, I have to turn the page and then I have to feel it and I have to draw it laterally inverted, and then I have to feel it so that I know what picture I've drawn, which is very cumbersome, right, in the long run. For every picture, if you had to do this. So when she told Paul, why don't you make something out of it? Paul actually designed a small device called, now he calls it the roulette, and we're shipping it along with. So this is basically, you take that device and you draw it on the same side of the paper, same side drawing, like a pencil drawing, and the paper gets perforated and comes up, so you can touch and feel it. Something like a tailor's wheel, right? Like that. So things like that, I think a lot of such, aspects have been taken care. And of course, making it the digital side of it to make it screen reader friendly so that they can hear, all these have been taken care of. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, all three speakers, for the wonderful and inspiring talk. I have a question regarding the scale up of this effort. So I was just wondering, have you seen some traction in terms of uptake from the community in contributing various aspects of whatever you're producing, be it content, the games that are being produced, or the pedagogic content, etc. So have you seen any kind of traction, community traction from this? Because looks like we are in dire need of hands to help us with creating enough content.
Absolutely. We are in need of, dire need of, content is the one thing where we need a lot of support. And we have very few people out there who have expertise, specific expertise in this. So we need a lot of hands. The answer to the question, has the community been involved in the content creation? Like I said, in many ways they have been, without their knowledge that they have been actually contributing to, whether it's the technology or whether it's the content, because it's them who tell us what. For example, we have a geometry workshop for them, or an algebra workshop, and we are actually running it through the teachers, and then we learn there when we show them, okay, this is how you're going to run this, do this experiment, and then they say, they themselves give us feedback on what, so we incorporate those into it. Other than this, there are some schools across the country where there have been, in pockets, teachers who have been working in this field for decades, and they have created beautiful things. For example, it's a beautiful thing, actually. I can share the some pictures with you. There's this teacher in Ramakrishna Mission Blind Boys Academy, Narendrapur, and he's created, for all the theorems from 6th standard to 12th standard, for all the theorems he's created tactile models with the wood he's created, and he uses that to demonstrate it to the children. Geometry. So we are trying now to work with him to make sure that Professor Bera's kit is something which goes to every school. So like that. So there are, and so this, for example, so he would be creating the tutorials around those. Or say, for example, like I said, 1,200 teachers in Tamil Nadu, right? So like Hope Foundation wanted to help them, but then they didn't know how to go about it. Now, when they started creating some of these teachers with visual impairment, who were somewhat digitally literate, came to us, and we worked with them, trained them on how to create the tutorials. Vidya trained them, and then they created the tutorials, and we then published it. So this way there have been a lot of contributions. But yeah, what we are now trying to see is that how, like, whatever teaching material is there, say for the concepts, the concept modules that we're creating, how we can get more teachers into this we are trying. For this, two things we're doing. One is the communities of practice, which I said. So for that, we're trying to create a platform, a digital platform, where people can actually, so through WhatsApp, they should be able to connect and contribute. That's one. And the other is through the B.Ed programs. Yeah.
So two parts to this. One is we ran one competition. I forget the name. ACM.
Yeah, the ACM CTI is computational thinking in schools.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, that's a
annual
great one.
conference on computational
Yes.
thinking in schools.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I think we set up a competition saying create ludic design based approaches to teaching concepts in computational thinking. It's a huge set of demand, outcome, participation, and we gave some cash prizes to winners
Yes,
and so on.
yes, yes.
And
Microsoft.
it
Yeah.
was The key reason why I like the ludic approach, even though I named it and so on, is because it's play. Everyone likes to play and everyone likes to change rules to suit their requirements. That's why there's no central authority. Example I give is the gully cricket. Every gully has a different set of rules. They want to play and they don't care about regular rules. And if the boy owns the bat, puts a rule, it is accepted because no choice. We want to play, right? So it's so democratic that play is central. Every teacher, so creative that given a broad outline of what is it that is there, I'm sure many varieties will show up. So that is one organic way of doing. The other one I put the Gen AI stuff is, this is where the scale is not about more games and more content. It's also about culturally, locally relevant kind of games and play in the language of that community, right? So it's a huge challenge. I am hoping Gen AI with all the hype will give us some way of mitigating this scale challenge. So given some say 50, 100 examples that we already created, we can say, hey, create more games of this to communicate this concept. And I've seen that initial experiments I have tried, very promising, coming up with very different things which an average teacher will not be able to think about. Average teacher also can say, given this set of context in my school, my teachers, my students, create games that we can play here, culturally relevant. Neem seeds as opposed to some other seeds because that is available here, right? So I'm hoping Gen AI is going to play an important role, but organically, locally, that creativity is not be curtailed because the amount of creativity the teachers across the country have put in on their own is enormous. Given some hint, which is what I think we is doing, is giving them a new way of thinking about pedagogy and curriculum, which they've not been exposed to before. Given this trigger, I'm hoping they will be creating many kinds of things. Next year, we go back, they would have modified each of these games because it'll be obvious after kids will modify it. That's how things will happen. They will make it and then it will go from like all these silly rhymes that every school has, right? It's been passed down for 20 years. There's some they will say, and that will be passed on to the next grade. Games and play will continue. This is very optimistic, but play, that's why I'm so excited. It has this life into it, which you don't need a central authority to keep on improving and maintaining. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, last year, CTIS Pune, last year at ISER, so we created these groups from the schools, the teachers from the special schools. So this was the first time they actually took part in a national level conference. So they actually presented 6 teachers came and presented from across the country. So we're hoping this year, we just had the meeting yesterday actually. Yes, we should. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure, sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mrs.
Okay, I'm not even sure of value, but still, and like, have there been attempts at from what I understand, the schools the special schools for disabled children are sort of segregated, right? I mean, they're silos. I mean, you have either schools for visually impaired or hearing impaired and all that.
Yes.
Is that a good idea, first of all? And would there actually be a benefit in having schools which bring these different disabilities together into a common platform? I mean, I don't know if, like for example, one wild thought could be something like pair programming, right? I mean, would it help to have a hearing impaired and a visual impaired child sit together and learn? They can sort of reinforce each other. I mean, have there been attempts of this kind at all to address?
In India, no. In India, no. But there are countries where they are trying this model. Indonesia has schools which are where all people with all disabilities are clubbed and put under one roof, and it makes it not, I'm not sure how much they thought of it from the perspective that you are looking at. It seemed like it was the convenient thing to do to for the government to be able to manage people with disabilities because they're under one roof, and then you provide them one, similar kind of facilities, right? But having said that, actually what we find is the solutions for people with visual impairment and say other learners, right, are not necessarily the same. I mean, the departure point itself is different. So when you think of a solution, if right from the beginning we think, see, there is one, like the concept of UDL, for example, Universal Design for Learning, which is something like what you're saying. Like in the classroom, there would be people with all kinds of disabilities, and you should be able to create a lesson plan, which will be with which you will be able, every child will be able to go back with the concept. But here, like what we felt is there is often there's sort of a understanding issue where the teacher actually has to create different ways of different methods of teaching, where if there's a child with visual impairment, there's a child with hearing impairment, and a child with autism, and a child who on the outside doesn't have any of all of this, or a learning disability, then all the way you teach, then the lesson plan has to be written in 4 different versions actually. That is UDL. So if you were to do something like this, then if then it would have to be like what in fact the NEP says, or in fact now the policy says that everybody should be accepted. You cannot deny a child, admission in a regular school. Then it can happen in the mainstream school. It doesn't have to happen in a special school where only children with all kinds of disabilities come. It can happen in a mainstream school, right? Like if I send my son to DPS, and I have a daughter who's visually impaired, goes to the same school, and the teacher should be able to provide all the, pedagogic improvisations that are required. Now, if we as technologists look at that kind of solution where we are looking at UDL and implementing technologies, then it actually may be a great idea. That's what I think. But I don't know if it's only disabled children.
The broader question is, there is actually a national agreement. Inclusive schools. India has also signed it. But inclusive school means taking care of individual learning needs, which doesn't happen even for children without disabilities today. One is about resources. The other is the good thing about, there's a huge debate even on special schools for the blind or not. The good thing about schools for the blind is because the teachers, many of them, a large percentage are also blind. They also came from the same school system. There is empathy, support, and very enabling environment for them take care of their everyday lives. That is critical for a child. STEM suffers at 6th grade, but up to the first independent living skills are taught by teachers who are themselves people with the same impairment. That way, special schools for disabled, special schools for the deaf, empower the children at a very early stage, but they get cut off at a certain ceiling. The question is, take them from this at the 5th, 6th, and then mainstream it beyond. That's the short-term practical thing. Inclusive school, in most countries, like the US, for example, most schools are inclusive schools because there's a right for people with disabilities and the enforcement of it and the resources to enforce it. So every child who is blind has a special assistant in the class. Because the number of children who are blind is so low and they have enough money, they can do both. Given our numbers and the resources is impossible, which means today inclusive school, the child is in an inclusive school, but is mostly excluded from everything. She's sitting in one corner with nobody saying, oh, poor child sitting there. She's feeling sorry for herself and everything else is left, but in principle, you have included them. So which is really, practically speaking, for a long time to come, schools for the blind are here to stay. And that's why our approach is to uplift their skill levels of the teachers so that when they go to 7th, 8th grade, they're not cut out from STEM. So that's really the solution that is in practice possible.
Right. But then, I mean, so certainly there's this holy grail of inclusive schools is probably I mean, very, very long shot, right? But I mean, taking special schools for disabled children in whatever form for granted, right? But correct. So can we, is that a value at all? Is what I'm wondering. What? No, but you would have teachers of all kinds again, right? Then
So, thank you, Amit, Supriya, and Manohar, for this very wonderful and inspiring talk. It's interesting because on one side, it kind of makes me feel disabled because my education has taught me to wield a hammer with which I go and hit some nails. And it also is empowering because it shows me so many other ways of using my education and my abilities, whatever they might be, to make a meaningful impact. So thank you for this eye-opening talk. And I know all of us would probably like to carry on for a longer time here, but I can see that, and Supriya is so passionate about this subject that she will explain everything in all detail as long as it is required. But she has a very bad throat. I can see that, and she should rest her voice. And therefore, we'll close the session at this point. Thank you so much.